I let her steal my boat, not because I was weak, not because I didn't care, but because I wanted her to. See, when you deal with people like her, you don't fight them head on, you let their ego do the work. She thought she was outsmarting me, dragging my old wooden boat down the street, smiling for the neighbors, clipboard in hand, acting like she just saved the neighborhood. But what she didn't know was that the second her truck crossed my property line, she'd already walked into my trap. Every camera, every tracker, every document ready to turn her little power trip into her biggest public humiliation. I didn't lose my boat that day. She lost everything. The sun rose slow that morning, spilling gold across the lake behind my house, calm, perfect, silent. If you didn't know better, you'd think it was peace. But peace doesn't exist when you live under her. Karen, the HOA president, perfectly ironed blouses, hair stiff with control, voice sharp enough to cut through stone. She ran this neighborhood like her personal empire, one rule violation at a time. And lately her newest target was me, or more specifically my boat. It wasn't just any boat. It was my father's, built with his own hands before I was even born, oak ribs, brass bolts, painted by the same lake it now rested on. It wasn't shiny, it wasn't modern, but every scratch told a story. And to me, it wasn't just wood and steel, it was legacy. The one thing I refused to let die in this sterile, rule-choked community. But to Karen, it was a violation of neighborhood aesthetics, an unsightly vessel, detrimental to property values. She sent the first warning note taped to my front door: remove unapproved watercraft or face daily fines. Red letters, bold font, all caps, the HOA way of saying we own you. I laughed when I read it, because I knew what this was really about. See, Karen wasn't enforcing rules, she was enforcing ego. She liked to remind everyone that she could make you move a trash can, repaint a fence, trim a tree, all because she said so. And when she saw that old wooden boat sitting on my driveway, she saw something she couldn't control. And control was her favorite currency. So I played dumb. I ignored the letters, ignored the fake inspections. Even waved at her every morning when she'd slow, walk past my house pretending not to stare. But behind the smiles, I was watching her carefully, because I knew how she operated. First, she complains. Then she threatens, then she acts, and I was counting on that. Weeks went by and her obsession grew. She took photos from her car window. She filed community complaints. She even tried to get the HOA board to vote on unsanctioned property cleanup. But she didn't know I'd been recording every second. My cameras caught her on my property line trespassing, pointing, muttering under her breath about eyesores. She didn't know that the day she finally took my boat would be the day she lost everything, because that old boat, the one she hated so much, was about to become my greatest weapon. I started setting the stage, moved it slightly closer to the curb, left the tarp half pulled back, made it look abandoned, but under that old tarp, a camera hidden in the railing, a GPS tracker under the seat, a laminated legal notice taped inside the cabin, signed, dated, witnessed, every detail, every safeguard, every piece of proof I'd need once she crossed the line. Because I knew Karen. She didn't just want me to obey. She wanted to win publicly. She wanted the neighborhood to see her take action, to see her power in motion. And I wanted her to have exactly that moment. The bait was set, and I didn't have to wait long. A few days later, I got another letter: final warning, immediate removal required, HOA enforcement action pending. That was my signal. The clock was ticking. I smiled, folded the letter neatly, and placed it in a drawer labeled evidence. Because when you're dealing with snakes, you don't stomp on them. You wait until they crawl into the trap themselves. That night, I sat by the window, watching the moonlight shimmer on the boat's surface. I could almost hear my father's voice again. Never let anyone take what you've earned. Don't worry, Dad. I wasn't going to lose it. Not the boat, not the legacy, not this time. What Karen didn't know was that every nail, every plank, every inch of that boat was more than just a memory. It was a plan, and when she finally decided to take it, she'd be taking her own downfall with it. Because sometimes the best way to destroy a bully is to let them think they're winning, and Karen, she was about to feel like the queen of victory. right before the whole board watched her kingdom burn. The calm before the storm was over. I could feel it. Tomorrow would be the day she made her move, and I'd be waiting, camera rolling, documents ready, trap set. All she had to do was take the bait. It happened on a Tuesday morning, the kind of morning that feels too still, too perfect, like the world itself is holding its breath. The lake shimmered under a thin layer of mist. The air was cool, quiet. And then, cutting through that silence came the sound, a deep, grinding engine. Low, powerful, getting closer. I stepped to the window and pulled the blinds back. There she was. Karen. White SUV. HOA logo magnet slapped on the side like that gave her authority over everything she touched. Behind it, a rented tow truck idling, exhaust fumes curling up into the morning air, and at the end of the chain, my boat. 2 men in neon vests stood by the hitch, tightening the straps. Karen stood in front of them, sunglasses on, clipboard in hand, that smug "I own you" smile glued to her face. I didn't move, didn't shout, didn't stop her, because this was exactly what I'd been waiting for. She looked so proud, barking orders like she was leading a military operation. "Make sure you get the trailer wheels too," she snapped. "Property standards require immediate removal." The neighbors peeked out from their windows. Some even stepped outside, and that was the part she loved the most, the attention. Every eye on her, every whisper feeding her ego. They thought I was being punished. They thought she was enforcing order. What they didn't know was that she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life. I hit record on my phone quietly from behind the curtain, capturing her every move. The men latched the hook, cranked the winch, and the boat groaned as it lifted. Wood creaked, chains tightened, tires rolled. My father's boat was leaving the driveway. Karen looked back one last time, that triumphant smirk etched across her face before she climbed into her SUV and drove off like a hero in her own story. But she wasn't a hero. She was the villain walking right into her own ending, because inside that ugly old boat, under the floorboard, was a tracker blinking silently, and 2 small GoPro cameras, one in the cabin, one near the stern, both recording every angle, every second, and taped to the inside panel a legal notice. Removal or relocation of this property without written consent of the owner constitutes theft under Section 609(52) of state law. Signed, stamped, dated. I didn't even call the cops right away. No, I waited, because I wanted her to feel safe first, to believe she got away with it, to let that arrogance sink in deep enough that when the truth hit, it would shatter everything she stood on. Hours passed. Neighbors kept whispering, wondering if I'd finally learned my lesson. Karen strutted around like she'd just restored peace to the world. By noon, I checked my laptop. The tracker showed the boat's new location. Not impounded, not stored, not processed by any official department. It was parked behind the HOA maintenance lot, chained up like a trophy. She hadn't removed my boat. She'd stolen it. That was all I needed. I grabbed my folder, every letter, every timestamp, every photograph, and the footage from my house cameras. Then I made the call. Sheriff's Department. I said, "I need to report a stolen boat, and I have video proof of who took it." They sent 2 deputies. When I showed them the footage, Karen's truck, the license plate, the timestamp, her voice shouting commands, they looked at each other and nodded. One of them asked quietly, "She really thought this was legal?" I smiled. "She always does." They drove to the HOA lot first, and when they arrived there, it was my father's boat, still chained, still sitting in the open. Karen standing right beside it, clipboard in hand, trying to explain to a few confused board members how this was community property enforcement. When the sheriff stepped out of the car, her face drained of color, he asked, "Ma'am, do you have written permission from the owner to remove his property?" She stammered, tried to wave her papers, mumbled something about unsightly conditions. Then he handed her a copy of the law and told her she was being investigated for unauthorized seizure of private property. She froze, right there in front of everyone, neighbors watching from across the street, board members whispering, phones recording. The woman who'd spent years threatening people with violations was now the one being cited. Her voice cracked as she tried to argue I was just following regulations. But the sheriff pointed at the laminated notice inside the boat's cabin. This says otherwise. You could have heard a pin drop. They unchained the boat, escorted it back to my property, police lights flashing, neighbors watching in stunned silence. It was poetic. The same people who watched her drag it away that morning now watched the law drag it right back. Karen couldn't even look up. She stood there, hands shaking, clipboard hanging useless at her side. I didn't say a word to her, just watched as the deputies parked the boat exactly where it had been. Then one of them turned to me and said, "You did everything right, sir. You let her hang herself." Exactly, because the thing about control freaks like her is they're predictable. They always go too far. And when they do, they don't realize they've already stepped into the trap. That night, she called for an emergency HOA meeting, something about miscommunication and unfortunate misunderstandings. But it was too late. The story was already out. The neighborhood group chats were blowing up with photos of the sheriff at the lot, videos of Karen arguing, and whispers of lawsuits. She'd crossed a line she couldn't come back from. And I wasn't done yet, because the next day I was walking into that meeting with a flash drive and the final nail in her coffin. The HOA clubhouse was packed that night. Every seat filled, every whisper buzzing through the air like electricity before a storm. Karen sat at the head of the long oak table, shoulders stiff, jaw tight, hands folded like she was still in control. But her eyes gave her away. They darted from one board member to another, searching for loyalty she no longer had. Because word travels fast when the queen loses her crown, the sheriff's visit had shaken the whole neighborhood. The woman who once fined people for mismatched shutters was now the subject of a police report, and everyone wanted to see how she'd talk her way out of it. I walked in late, calm, quiet. The sound of my boots echoed across the floor, and the room fell silent. Karen looked up, forced a smile, one that cracked before it even reached her eyes. "Oh, good, you're here," she said, pretending authority. "We were just about to resolve this misunderstanding." I didn't say a word. I just placed a small flash drive on the table and slid it forward. "Play it," I said. The vice president hesitated, glanced at me, then at Karen. But curiosity won. He plugged it into the projector, and then silence. Just the soft hum of the machine before the screen flickered to life. There she was, Karen, standing in my driveway, giving orders. Smiling, laughing, waving her clipboard like a queen commanding an army, every word, every step, every second of her operation, caught in crystal clear detail. Her voice echoed through the room, "Make sure you get the trailer too. This thing's a neighborhood disgrace." A murmur swept across the room. Some board members looked away. Others stared at her in disbelief. Then came the next clip, the sheriff at the HOA lot, reading her the statute, showing her the notice from inside the boat. Her face red, her voice cracking, trying to explain what she'd done. When the video ended, no one spoke. I leaned forward, calm but sharp. "This wasn't enforcement," I said. "This was theft. Documented, recorded, and reported. I have every timestamp, every letter, every photo." Karen's lips trembled. That footage was taken out of context. She stammered. "I was trying to protect." "Protect who?" I cut in. "Yourself, your ego, or the illusion that you own everyone here." The vice president cleared his throat. "Karen, this is serious. You can't just seize someone's property." Her voice broke. "I was just doing my job." "No," I said, standing. "You were doing what you always do, abusing power, hiding behind rules you made up and calling it order." Silence. You could feel the shift. The board wasn't on her side anymore. Even her closest allies looked at her with the kind of fear people reserve for sinking ships. The treasurer finally spoke, effective immediately. He said slowly, "We're suspending Karen from her position as HOA president pending investigation." Karen's head snapped toward him. "You can't do that." But the vice president had already started gathering papers. "It's done," he said. "We'll be reviewing your actions with legal counsel. You should leave." The words hit her like a hammer. Her face went pale. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked small. No authority, no clipboard, no power. Just a woman caught in her own game. She grabbed her bag, muttered something about lawyers, and stormed out. The door slammed, and the echo lingered like the end of a storm. I stood there for a moment, watching her shadow disappear through the glass. Then I turned back to the room. Let this be a reminder. I said quietly, authority doesn't mean ownership, and fear doesn't equal respect. Nobody argued. When I left that meeting, the night air felt different, lighter. The same houses looked the same streets stretched before me, but the weight that had hung over this neighborhood for years was gone. And the next morning, my driveway was no longer empty. The boat sat exactly where it belonged, freshly polished, gleaming under the sunrise like a symbol of quiet victory. Neighbors stopped by one after another, some just to look, some to shake my hand. One old man said, "She's been bullying people for years. Guess someone finally gave her a taste of her own medicine." I didn't smile, I just nodded, because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about balance. About proving that no one, no board, no title, no clipboard has the right to strip others of dignity. A week later, I got the notice. Karen had resigned for personal reasons. No one believed it. She sold her house quietly under market value, moved out before sunrise, didn't even look back. The HOA board, now under new leadership, sent out a revised charter, fewer rules, less nonsense, more freedom. No more fines for flower pots, no more threats for unauthorized mailboxes. The neighborhood finally breathed again. Sometimes I take the boat out at dusk. The water calm, the sky fading into gold. The same boat she once called an eyesore, now gliding across the lake like a ghost of her downfall. I can still hear her voice in my head, sometimes all that arrogance, all that certainty, and I can't help but laugh. Because in the end, she didn't just steal my boat. She stole her own peace, her own credibility, her own illusion of control, and all I had to do was let her. Because the truth is, when you deal with people like Karen, you don't fight their power. You let their pride destroy it for you. And as the boat drifts into the sunset, I whisper to the quiet water, "Thanks, Dad. You built this with your hands, and it ended up building my freedom." The waves ripple softly, like the lake itself is smiling back. And that's when I realized the best revenge isn't loud. It's silent, calm, complete, just like the lake that morning, right before everything changed.